All right, now our speaker today is somebody who's been with us a long time, Kevin Hauber, and we're going to find out if he's recovered from bumping his head. He says he's not in there. So Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so I'm working with a little bit of an unstable connection here this morning on the Wi-Fi. So let's all just count on the best for that, and we'll go from there. So you may be aware of the recent passing of Thich Nhat Hanh. Now I'm doing my best with the Vietnamese pronunciation there. So, you know, if you've got a better pronunciation than that, let me know when we get to that point. But he was, of course, a Buddhist monk who was known all over the world and dearly loved by many, and brought a lot of wisdom to so many people. And I want to reference something that that he wrote about his own death. And it speaks well to the theme that I wanted to address today. This is called, "I Am Not in Here." So he says that, "I have a disciple in Vietnam who wants to build a stupa for my ashes when I die. He and others want to put a plaque with the words, 'Here lies my beloved teacher.' I told them not to waste the temple land. 'Do not put me in a small pot and put me in there,' I said. 'I don't want to continue like that. It would be better to scatter the ashes outside to help the trees grow.' I suggested that if they still insist on building a stupa, that they have the plaque say, 'I am not in here.' But in case people don't get it, they could add a second plaque, 'I am not out there either.' And if people still don't understand, then you can write a third and last plaque that says, 'I may be found in your way of breathing and walking.' I may be found in your way of breathing and walking. This body of mine will disintegrate, but my actions will continue me. In my daily life, I always practice to see my continuation all around me. We don't need to wait until the total dissolution of this body to continue. We continue in every moment. If you think that I am only this body, then you have not truly seen me. When you look at my friends, you see my continuation. When you see someone walking with compassion, you know he is my continuation. I don't see why we have to say, 'I will die,' because I can already see myself in you, in other people, and in future generations. Even when the cloud is not there, it continues as snow or rain. It's impossible for a cloud to die. It can become rain or ice, but it cannot become nothing. The cloud does not need to have a soul in order to continue. There's no beginning and no end. I will never die. There will be a dissolution of this body, but that does not mean my death. I will continue always." Now that's excerpted from Thich Nhat Hanh in his book, At Home in the World, Stories and Essential Teachings from a Monk's Life, that was published in 2015. Feels like he has a pretty solid set on that transition and what he wants within that. And what it brought up for me is that we tend to get so tied to form and to place. And the piece that he wrote speaks to a consciousness that is way beyond form and place. So like the disciple, often we want to create stupas to remember others or to be remembered ourselves. And then someone comes along to remind us, like Thich Nhat Hanh, that I'm not in here. So our appearance in form is quite temporary and quite transitory. Our souls go through a process of incarnation and excarnation, only to incarnate again for another experience, followed by another excarnation out of form again. And along the way, our souls gather experiences and evolve, some more so than others, some faster than others, but we have all done this dance before. How much time in life is spent building those monuments? How much effort is expended literally trying to hold back time? There are entire industries that are born of this. Think about cosmetics. What is that for if not to enhance the form and hold back time? Think about the building industry. What is that for if not to build something secure and quote unquote permanent? And yet buildings have a lifespan just like we do. Notice, I might point out, that there are not many 200-year-old buildings left around here, and only a few 100-year-old buildings left. It all disintegrates, as our monk friend reminds us. So I'm reminded once again of the Hindu tradition of the threefold aspect of God. God as creator, God as preserver, and God as destroyer. Most of us don't have any problem with the God as creator part, though creation can be quite a struggle in itself. And most of us don't have a problem with God as preserver in that part. In fact, we often worship that part, wanting things to stay the same. More accurately, we may want things to stay the same as they were in that one ideal moment that we remember. And we can hold on to those kinds of memories quite tightly. And then there's that God as destroyer part that we tend to fear. Our Buddhist monk friend says that he and everything else in form will disintegrate, and he's right. What I've come to know in this process is that characterizing it as God as destroyer doesn't really tell the story. It's more God as recycler, dust to dust, and then recycled once again. And that is just part of the problem, but a part of the process rather, but that's not cause to despair. I'm learning a different relationship to this process that I want to share with you. It has to do with that part where Thich Nhat Hanh says, I may be found in your way of breathing and walking. So his wisdom will outlive him by many generations, long after anything that he knew in form has disintegrated, or long after anyone that he knew is gone also. His life will continue in what he's left us. So in my men's group, we talk about it in these forms. We need to become competent in our physical ego-bound world. We need to be able to walk in the world. We need to learn to navigate and ground ourselves in life so that we can be fully present for the gift of the present that we're in. And we need to become conversant with the personal aspects of ourselves and take ownership of our feelings, our desires, our fears, and our projections of all of that onto other people and onto things. There has to be a recognition that, yes, there is an aspect of me at work again, and I need to make it as authentic an expression as I possibly can. And then there is the transpersonal aspect that we need to develop. Now, as the word implies, transpersonal goes beyond the self. So this is the part of us that knows our purpose, that knows what we're here for and is willing to act from that. we somehow gain awareness of that transpersonal part and develop an energy and an expression that will outlive us and bless others who we haven't even met yet. We have to gain fluency in all of these levels, the gross physical, the personal, and the transpersonal, in that order without skipping levels. Trying to skip levels is called spiritual bypass. And that looks something like, this being in a body stuff is hard, so I will just focus on the spiritual and manifest my purpose. Have you ever heard that one? Spiritual bypass, it occurs to me, is something that will cause, well, in that kind of a situation, the body will say, hey, wait a minute, here's this thing that you haven't taken care of yet. And you need to come back and work on the gross physical level. We don't exist in just one plane at a time, but we have our work to do throughout these levels. And it occurs to me that the important thing is not to become too hung up in any one particular level. So if we're working on stuff in the gross physical level, let's do that diligently and without attachment, and doing so while being as present as we can. If we're dealing with something on the personal level, know that the emotions and the wants and the aversions at that level come through us in waves. And yet we are more than just the waves. So don't become too identified with feelings. We are more than our feelings. We are more than whatever is going on at the personal level right now. Yet we can feel it fully and know that there's something good for us in there, something that will contribute to our soul path. It's easy to get hung up at that next transpersonal level where all of the great spiritual and powerful energy beyond self, beyond little s self, is found. It can be quite blissful and quite seductive even. But how do we bring that energy back and ground it into our lives? How do we bring it back to be of benefit to ourselves and to others? So have you ever heard the expression that he was so heavenly that he was of no earthly use? That's the kind of thing that I'm getting to here. Let's be heavenly and of earthly use at the same time. And then the form will change and we will get to do it all over again. Remember, I may be found in your way of breathing and walking. So just take a moment and breathe into that. I may be found in your way of breathing and walking. Relax into that for a moment, just like you relax into the cycle of your breath. I had my lesson around this teaching of impermanence this week. A dear friend of mine was prone to depression. He sank very deep into depression for quite a while now. And he chose to take his own life, despite the best efforts of those of us around him who knew him well and were supporting him. I have been heartbroken about that. He was a person who was able to work at all of the levels of being, the gross physical, the personal, the transpersonal, deftly, and he brought wonderful gifts into the world and to me as a friend. And yet something in his soul path called him on, out of form this time, and on to another experience. I've been wrestling with, is it possible for me to mourn that loss and yet cheer his soul on at the same time? That feels really challenging. Now, I hope to do so, since that's what I have an opportunity for at this point, releasing my judgments along the way. Because I can't help but have judgments about the situation, about what's unfolded. But if I can release that, in that way, the purpose that he had and the blessings that he gave live on through me and through the others that have known him. We can't control events. We can't control the soul paths of others. We might barely be aware of our own paths and our own purpose, but we can work through this cycle gracefully, or at least as gracefully as we can, without clinging, and breathe into the fullness of life along the way. So going back to what Thich Nhat Hanh said, this body of mine will disintegrate, but my actions will continue me. In my daily life, I always practice to see my continuation all around me. We don't need to wait until the total dissolution of this body to continue. We continue in every moment. If you think that I'm only this body, then you have not truly seen me. When you look at my friends, you see my continuation. When you see someone walking with compassion, you know he is my continuation. I don't see why we have to say, I will die, because I can already see myself in you, in other people, and in future generations. I will continue always. So thank you, bless you, namaste. Thank you for hearing me today.